The webinar has started. Welcome everyone to the CRB meeting. Carolyn, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, I'm gonna just wait a moment. I see we have a minutes recorder. That's wonderful. And Jose is in the attendees. Can
I
we
will
move
switch
him
him
over?
over. Nope, Jose is?
I see his name.
I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm promoting Jose.
Promotion granted.
Promotion. I'm gonna text Vicky and Cindy and see if they want to be promoted, but I think they probably.
How long have you been using Zoom now, Jose? And you still?
To be fair,
It's fine.
I'm late.
Yeah, we had a big school thing and the teachers totally like sent out the wrong Zoom link. I'm like, teachers, and they were so embarrassed because they've been using Zoom all year too. So
That's what I was going to say to Michael. Competence in Zoom is not a requirement to be teaching right now.
it's very true.
Goodness.
Okay, so let's get started. We have quorum. Leah was saying earlier that Bernadette will not be making it tonight, to those of you who did not hear that. And also Clay has not officially been onboarded and I think he's on vacation, so.
Oh yeah, it's just that he's gone though. His background's done. He's fully ready. Or he just isn't.
Right. He's had the background, but we haven't had the chat with him yet.
Yeah, that's coming.
Welcome. Okay. So, so this is us for tonight.
This is
Okay.
us.
So we're going to start with the agenda and materials review. If there are any changes that we want to make to the agenda. Did everybody have a chance to open the OneDrive? Did that work for everybody? Good.
I really like that.
The password went to my spam folder, like the little passcode, but I found it. So I felt pretty fancy to find that without help. So any changes to the agenda? No, okay, so we will approve the agenda. Do we have to? We don't have to second that or anything. We just approve it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we do need to approve the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes from the July meeting? Any adjustments? It was a long time ago reading those minutes. I was like, I do remember this. Yes. Okay, so is there a movement to approve the minutes from July?
I'll move,
Okay,
even though I
thank you,
didn't read
Michael.
them.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And do we all approve the minutes? Just give a thumbs up if you do, or a wave, yeah, anything. Okay.
Well, I read them, but since I hadn't been briefed into the cases, I feel not appropriate to vote on them. So I'm abstaining. Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks.
Thank you. We still pass. So now we will have our comments from board members and commission liaisons. So are there any comment, or let's see, where should we start tonight? Do the commission liaisons, did you want to start? Do you have a? Okay, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so Police Commission met just last Thursday, which is why I feel confident sharing, because it hasn't been a month. So I think most relevant for this body was that there had been some question over the recent weeks from police commissioners as to what to do when they received complaints directly. There was a complainant who had contacted a number of people on the police commission, although not myself, and with a complaint that it turns out had also been received by the auditor's office. And there were a number of police commissioners who really wanted to reach out to that complainant and be in touch with them. And it was clarified that that's not the police commissioner's role, that complaints need to be routed through proper channels, which means through the police auditor's office, and that if the complaint had not already been received, that the appropriate person on the police commission to do that routing would be me as the liaison between the two boards. I guess apparently that's implied, if not stated somewhere in the ordinance. But it turns out the complainant had already contacted the auditor's office, and so that no work was needed on my part. It was just a matter of clarifying for the commission. I think other than that, it wasn't a terribly eventful commission meeting. But yeah, we've got our work plan for the next few years. I will not be on the police commission for all of that work plan, but it's one of the things that I think is good for commissioners to note. I didn't know until I was on the police commission, or CRB members to know, is that the police commission does have this work plan, and doesn't tend to deviate it from it, I think, a lot. So if there are things that come up in the process of our deliberations that we want the police commission to pay attention to, it's not simply as easy as me going to that board and then bringing it up and it being addressed. It would still have to make it onto the work plan when that is revisited in 2 to 3 years. And at that point, it won't even make it on then, because there has to be a vote. And so there's I think I at least had a simplified understanding of how that worked when we were giving, I'm blanking on her name. Lindsay, like Leia? No, when we were giving Lindsay things to take to the police commission, I think I had it in mind that she was then bringing them and they were getting addressed, but that's not how it works. So I can talk about that more if people want more answers on that, but I think we might be useful to think about that at some point.
Thank you, Michael. Jose, do you have anything, or I mean, about yourself or about the commission? Go ahead.
About myself, no, I'm just kidding. The Human Rights Commission had said that they would contact me after they reconvened in September. They were taking the summer off. Yeah, so I think I should have an update next month.
Thanks. And you don't have any other comments on your own, unrelated?
Well, I mean, we are on a schedule here.
I know, but this is the time for it. All right, Bill, do you have any comments for the board?
I just want to say hello to everyone, and I'm glad to be back. Excuse me, except for my frog in my throat. Glad to be back and looking at cases again after a short break.
Thanks, Bill. Alan, do you have anything to add?
I do not. Thank you.
I don't either, except that I want to just remind everybody that when we're talking about the cases, we're going to use gender neutral pronouns just to help create anonymity or help protect that for the officers involved. It's good to remind everyone every time. So next is public comment, and there is no public as far as I can tell. I think the CEPD is probably a EPD.
No, that's Beatrice, who is
Right.
she's on leave and she's still logging in to see you find people. So just let's all say hi to Beatrice. Hi, Beatrice.
She's doing this just as her own personal time, not
For
as a
fun.
professional. All right, so seeing that there is no public comment, we can move on to the training topic, and that will be Ryan. Leah, do you want to introduce Ryan? Or Ryan?
Because this case had to do with sort of the background check process and how that's looked at, and it was a little different than your typical IA investigation, I thought it would be useful to have someone who does background checks come and talk. And they all had other obligations. So Ryan is kind and stepped up to give a sort of high level overview of the background check process, what that looks like. EPD is doing a lot of recruiting rather constantly these days. So it's one of those things that is, I think, it came up a lot at ad hoc as far as who they're selecting and who they're not. So I thought that would be helpful to have a little bit of a background, on the background check process. So Sergeant Ryan Nelson from Internal Affairs is here to tell you all about that. And if we have more specific questions, then I can bring back the officer and the sergeant who are Supervisor B and Supervisor or whatever, the people in the file. I can bring them back to do a more in-depth thing if you guys have questions that Ryan can't answer. So thank you, Ryan, for coming to talk to us tonight.
Yeah, you bet. So I've had the opportunity to do several hiring processes in the past. I haven't done one recently, so I have a pretty good understanding of it, but I also, there's been a lot of things that have changed. So I did some research, got a hold of a couple people today that are part of our recruiting team, and hopefully I'll get you through this. Like Leah said, if there's questions that you have that I can't answer, then I will definitely get those answered for you and either give them to Leah and she can provide them to you, or however we want to do that. So so like as Leah said, we're doing pretty much constant recruitment. We're doing lateral processes as well as new police officer processes, just to get our numbers up to where they need to be. What I was just planning on doing, I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but I just wanted to walk you through like the steps of the process and how that happens. So we'll work with HR department, and then they'll put out an application process that gets sent out through the city. Our recruitment team reaches out to people who've showed past interest to being a police officer, and they'll try to recruit some of the folks that we think that might be good for us to give a try to. So they'll fill out the application first, and there's minimum requirements on the application through the city, and I don't have all of those for you, but I know that all that stuff's posted on the city's website as far as what the minimum requirements are for application. If people meet that minimum requirement, then they move on to a multiple choice exam. And the exams, the companies that we use have all been vetted through national standards, and they're all specifically designed for police officers and for and capturing what is needed from an employee to be a good police officer. So if they pass the multiple choice exam, they move on to a written exam, and that's they watch a video, they show their memory towards events, they write a report. And so we get to see what their writing style is like and how well they capture things that might be important for a police officer to capture when they write that report. And those get graded as well. After the written exam, then there's a physical agilities exam, and it's it's a standard exam through the entire state through DPSST, which is the Department of Public Safety and Standards. And that physical exam is timed, and there's different like push-pull exercises, there's jumping, there's running, there's stairs, there's a bunch of different things that a person has to do, and they have to complete it within a certain period of time. There's a time window that they have to complete it in. If they pass that, then they are invited to interviews. Once they get to interviews, there's a panel. It's typically 2 supervisors, 2 sergeants that are on the panel that run the process. And then there's anywhere from 3 to 5, I would say, officers that are on the panel as well, that kind of round robin the questions and ask everybody a question that's on the list, and then they document everything that they do. The one thing that's kind of interesting about police officer interviews are, most interviews when you're in the private sector, it's kind of conversational, where you'll ask a question and then somebody will respond, and then you'll say, well, tell me more about that, or give me more information about what you just described. For the police officer exams, you really get one shot at, or the interviews, I'm sorry, you really get one shot at selling yourself. So somebody will ask a question, and then whatever information you provide for that question is basically how you're graded upon. And there's criteria that's pre-designed to, minimum scores and maximum scores on what they could get as far as what information they provide. But they aren't going to ask follow-up questions. So whatever the person provides in their first shot at the thing is basically how they get graded on that interview. If they make it through that interview, then there's a background that they are required to, information they're supposed to, a personal history questionnaire, which gives us a whole bunch of information about them. And it basically it again is vetted through a national company for law enforcement. And there's literally 150, maybe 200 questions on the thing. And they're specifically designed to have automatic disqualifications for some answers to some of those questions, and then other ones that may not be automatic disqualifications, but it'll flag like there's potentially an issue based off of how this person answered a question. So we can follow up on that afterwards and ask additional questions based off of how they answered that personal history question. There's a state. So DPSST is currently working on like a state requirement, like all agencies have to be in the same have to have all the same standards, because currently right now there's a lot of agencies do things differently. The great part about our agency currently right now is that we are currently holding all the standards that DPSST is requiring, and we're also meeting all the legislative requirements that have come out recently. So DPSST is really using us as a model on how they want other agencies to do their backgrounds and how they want them to do their hiring processes. So I found that out today. I wasn't aware of that. So that was kind of a neat thing that I found out. So we're already meeting all of those standards that they're going to require other agencies to fulfill. They also will get, after that, they get a personal history statement and a background packet. And so they're required to give us 10 years worth of their employment and any places that they have lived within the past 10 years. Now, the caveat to that is if they aren't old enough to be able to do that, then if they're 16 years old and older, or 10 years, depending upon how old the person might be that's applying for us. So we'll get all that information compiled, and that gives the background investigator, all these different people to contact as far as like previous, maybe landlords, previous employers, previous people that they worked with. And as you know, if you're filling out an application that you're trying to get hired from, you're probably going to put all the people down there that you really want the background investigator to talk to. So one of the things that we do really well with our backgrounds is that we really dig to try to get, like, give me another name. Every time we talk to somebody, hey, give me some other names of people who I might talk to that could tell me more about this person, so that we get away from all the people that they know are going to say great things about them. And we can maybe find some people who have different experiences with them, so that we can get the full picture as to what we're wanting to provide or to hire. Let's see, sorry, I lost my spot. So during that background check, or doing the background process, we do an in-house records check. So we'll check any potential involvement with law enforcement, both with, one of the problems that we have here locally is that like Lane County and Oregon State Police doesn't use the same system as far as reporting goes, data reporting goes. So we'll have to reach out to like Lane County and reach out to Oregon State Police, reach out, well, Springfield Police uses the same system, but we'll check and make sure they haven't had any law enforcement contacts, check and see if there's any reports that have been filed about their activities, do all that kind of stuff. We'll also do a DMV check. So we'll look through DMV records to see what their driving history has been like, and any crashes that they might have been involved with, their speeding tickets. And then we also check through DPSST, which is the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. And we ensure that if they've had any previous either law enforcement or security jobs or anything that DPSST would have to certify them for, we check to make sure there aren't any ethics violations that happened, and ensure that DPSST is actually able to certify them if they made it through our process. If anything pops up like that, if they say they're not certifiable, then that's pretty much an automatic disqualification. But if there's some things that they say, well, we've had some previous history or previous reports on this person, but we still could certify them, then that gives the investigator some other information to go look at and do some more investigating on to find out what happened in a previous employment situation. So the other thing that we do that is actually really unique, and it's nationwide, it's unique, is we travel for all of our backgrounds. So it doesn't matter where this person might be applying from. Everybody fights over the ones that apply from Hawaii. It's weird, I don't know. But we will fly there. And so most agencies, when we get there, are actually really shocked, because they're like, you guys really spent the money to actually fly somebody there to do an investigation. And in our opinion, it's too important of a job to fill to not have a face-to-face interview. And a lot of agencies actually do mailings to their applicants and to people that they put on their for references, and they just ask them to write a little thing about what they think about the person. So that's something that I have experienced, because I am a background investigator, where other agencies are just like shocked that you're spending the money to actually send somebody there and have a face-to-face interview. But it's super important. Once that background is complete, and typically it's like they typically have 3 weeks to complete a background once it's assigned to an investigator, and we allot 40 hours of time for that investigation to be completed. But that being said, if it's a travel background, or if there's a lot of other people that we need to interview, or we found some issues that we really need to dig into further, that is totally flexible. So your basic background is typically given 40 hours, but if we need more, we'll provide more to the investigator to make sure that we, vet everything through. Once that background is completed, they turn that in, and again, we have two hiring supervisors, which I think is somewhat unique as well, but it gives two different perspectives. You have two supervisors who are going to read this background, and both of them, are going to look at it differently. So it isn't just one person making a decision. The background investigator is going to provide the background as well as a recommendation letter, either recommending their hire or recommending not hire. And then the background or the supervisor, hiring supervisors will both sit down and read through all the information and look at the memo, and then they make a decision how they feel, whether they agree with the investigator or not. And then they also will write a recommendation letter. A new thing that I didn't know about that we just started doing is we put together what it's called the exec command. And so it's all of our division managers or captains along with the deputy chief. They all have a meeting with the two hiring supervisors, and they go over all the applicants. And that's an opportunity for people to raise questions or concerns. And then those two hiring supervisors will write their recommendation memo, which ultimately gets forwarded to the chief for the ultimate final decision. The other step that happens in between there is that the chief has a one-on-one with anybody who's made it to that point that's been recommended to move forward. They'll have a one-on-one sit down with that person with all the information that's been provided by the background investigator, the executive command committee, the hiring supervisors and all that, and then have a conversation and then make the final decision on it. Roughly from testing date to hire date is about 90 days or less is typically what we're looking at. Our background investigators you don't just get to be a background investigator, you actually have to get chosen to be a background investigator. And if you do get chosen, then it's a minimum of 2 trainings a year. And in those trainings, they get legal updates, they get sensitivity training, bias training, and they're all state certified trainings that they go through to continue their education as a background investigator. They're all confidential, so we don't release any information about backgrounds, and we don't discuss them with anybody, and it's just kind of one of those things where it's all locked up. So I went through a lot, and again, I'm not the background expert, but any questions about what I provided to you? Yeah.
I was wondering how many people tend to pass or fail out of the background check? Do we have a lot of people who, I don't need to clarify that question, it's a clear question.
Oh, I got you. So it really varies, Carolyn. I mean, I see a lot of people not make it through background in general. It's not like if you make it to background, you're home free. I mean, that honestly, we wash a lot of people out in the background just because, we're digging through, like, we're trying to find every skeleton in the closet kind of a thing. And the questions that are asked during our interviews, our initial interview with the applicant is typically between 3 and 4 hours long. So it is incredibly lengthy, hundreds of questions that we ask them. And then depending upon their answers, there could be multiple follow-up questions to those as well. So, it's super important, obviously, as you know, when you have the ability to do the things that police officers can do, that we get the right person in there and have them be there for the right reasons.
Yeah, so related to that, so it was thank you for that. That was really helpful.
Sure.
In addition to making it clear that I would not even make it to the background check because there's the memory tests and the agility tests, like I would just be out. But I'm curious. So, given that there's so many places and ways that people can wash out, and I know that the department's been having trouble filling positions currently. Where along the route do you find that that you have the most trouble with people not advancing? Is it the agility test, or is it the background check, or the interview?
Great question. I don't think I could actually, and I'm speaking from my experience. I think I've done 4 or 5 hiring processes, and again, that was a while ago. but I'm speaking from that experience, and my experience at that when I was doing those was it really varied. I mean, honestly, it really varied. So we'd watch some out there, and the part that I didn't even discuss yet too, and maybe I should bring it up, is that there's also a psychological exam that happens as well after the background, and then there's also a medical exam that happens after the conditional hire. So those are other layers that can the psychologist looks at the background, they look at the personal history questionnaire, and the psychology, the test you take, or the questionnaire you take for the psychologist is about, I want to say, I remember, and it's been almost 20 years now, so don't quote me on this, but I think it took me like 6 hours at least to complete. So it is super comprehensive too. So Michael, I saw people wash out in every single section of their process, and it's one of those things too where you'll see somebody where, you know, they might look really good in one area, but then they get to the psychological, and the psychologist goes, wow, there's all these red flags that are popping up. And so the fact that we have this layered process is really important, because somebody might do really well in one area, like they might be really physically fit and they might interview great, but then they've got an issue in the background, or they might have all these other things that are really good, but there's this other section here where it just isn't a good fit for them.
Thank you. And you know, so Chief said at the police commission meeting that last week that one of the difficulties he's seen has just been that people have trouble telling the truth, and that, you know, it's not even like sort of about big skeletons in people's closets, but just that people will lie in their interview and then get caught in the background check. And I'm and, you know, it sounds like it's just so much work to do all of that. I'm wondering, like, if you could give a sense of what the sort of how much of your resources are devoted toward doing background checks. I mean, I know, like, for my background check for this board, I remember it was a very long form to fill out, and I put down these people who would say nice things about me, and then none of them was ever contacted, which I assume is because at some point triage was done and they were like, okay, well, this person's already in these other positions. We don't, we have to devote our resources toward other things.
Sure. No, that's a great question. A lot of resources are put into it. Like I said, it takes a minimum 40 hours for each background. And so, I mean, I don't know the numbers we're moving through right now, but I can tell you that I know that it's not uncommon to bring, 15 to 20 people to background. So if you figure 40 hours a piece on each one of those people, it's significant. I mean, it's really significant. But again, the importance, it's just so incredibly important to have the right fit, putting a uniform on and having that sort of authority to be able to do what their job is.
I think, Bill, you were trying to ask a question a minute ago.
Yeah, and I think Alan had his hand up too.
Oh, okay.
So Ryan, when you do the background, do you ever go back with the applicant and discuss some of the things that you found, or kind of try to see what their answers are for why somebody said this about them, or why this is different than what you expected to be?
Yeah, you bet. Unlike the interview, like I described before, where you just get the one shot at it, the background is completely different. So if you find things that you have questions about, or people are asking or telling you things that you're like, wow, that just doesn't seem like that fits, then it is absolutely common for us to bring them back in for what we call a discrepancy interview, and just talk about some of the things that we found. And sometimes they have a perfectly plausible explanation for the information, but other times you can, like Michael said, sometimes people aren't completely honest when they apply. And so vetting those things out is absolutely something we do. Yes. Hey, Alan.
Oh, yeah, Ryan, I'm curious, since legal marijuana, has the city's approach to hiring police officers changed such that it's totally understandable that before, disqualification, recent use and stuff, but the world is different and you may be losing applicants. I'm just curious, what's the deal? Thank you.
So that's one that I'm not going to be able to give you the exact answer on. I do know that that has loosened for us, and so we are allowing that, and I just don't know to what level, and I don't know what the parameters are on that. I certainly could get that info for you and give it to Leah, and then she could push it out to you guys.
It's certainly an undercurrent of what we're going to be talking, it's there, it's present in tonight's discussion, but yeah, I'd be curious, how many are washing out along the lines of the prior, question, how much is washed out because of that issue? Thank you.
I think the answer is, and again, I'll clarify that, but I think the answer is they're not for just marijuana use because of the changes in the Oregon state law. But I will clarify that to make absolute certain of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I would assume that in the questionnaire, there's some alcohol questions, because at this point, those are kind of the same level, right? Like alcohol and marijuana. So I imagine that there are some alcohol use questions that they're asked that we just didn't see in this case, but it would kind of follow the same lines. Is that accurate?
There are alcohol related questions. I'm not sure you're correlating it to this case, so fill me in on that part of it.
Well, I guess I'm asking, you would ask, like you were asking in we kind of got a sneak peek into, or not a sneak, we got a peek into this of like how often or how recently they use marijuana.
Sure.
So I guess I'm asking is, are there questions about how often you use alcohol, or how often you have more than 4 drinks in a night, or how often you use that substance?
Yes, alcohol questions are in there. It's been a while since I've done a background because this IA stuff has been keeping me so busy that I can't find the time to carve out 40 hours to do one. So, but yes, there are absolutely questions about alcohol use. And then we also ask that, when we're talking to their people that they put on as references or other folks that we talk to, those questions definitely get brought up as far as alcohol and drugs. Have you ever seen them use drugs? Do they, have you ever seen them intoxicated? How often do they get intoxicated? Those kind of things are absolutely part of the questions.
I have a question if no one else wants to. I'm not on the board, but something I've heard come up a lot in discussions is, how much does social media come into the background checks as far as checking what they post about?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely something that we do. And so we can't like request passwords or anything like that for accounts that are blocked or that they have private, but anything that's out on available to the public, we certainly search all that social media stuff. That's one of the first things I try to hit, because if somebody isn't thinking about the fact that they just applied for a police officer position, they may not have gone in and deleted stuff. So if I get a background packet, the first thing I do before even interviewing anybody is I'll quickly just go on to all the social media outlets that I can think of. And again, I'm old, so I probably miss a bunch of them because most of these people have stuff that I've never even heard of. But I go to the ones I can and I look and see if there's anything that they post to the public. So absolutely comes into play. We've had that come up quite often, actually. Good question, Leah.
You just need to hire a teenager, Ryan, to come in and help you with that part.
I know. If it wasn't so confidential, I'd just get my 16-year-old and say, hey, help me out.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I have one other one, and it's not direct at the background, Ryan, but do people that don't make it through, let's say all the way up to like the interview, say that in any one of those stages up until that point, do they reapply and come back after that and try to, maybe they didn't do the physical one, they lost the written one? Is that acceptable for them to come back and do that again?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I'll have to clarify too. And but because there's a certain point in time, if you've made it to, I think if you make it to background, then you have to wait a certain period of time before you can reapply. And I want to say it's a year before they can reapply, but I'm not certain. I'll find that out too, and I'll get it to Leah. But if we have people that apply multiple times all the time. And one of the things, and you'll find, we'll talk about this more in this case when that's coming up, but what we do and what's supposed to happen is that every time they do anything process related with us, is that stays in a file. And then if they apply again, then we pull out and reference that material or anything that they've done testing wise or background wise, so that we can use that for the next background and the next background. So there's some applicants that, yeah, I mean, we have, multiple backgrounds on that still have never been hired. And, some of the things could be reasons, I mean, just as an example, could be reasons of, just they've done something, there's something in their background that would preclude them from ever being hired, but that's not information we can share. So they just continue to apply and they don't really know.
All right, anything else for Ryan before we move on? As always, I'm sure that if any questions occur to you later, you could email Leah and she would pass that on to Ryan and he would get that back. I think before we move on to the training or to the case, I always feel weird about having the public comment happen before it's stated on the agenda. If somebody really wanted to talk and they show up after or before the time, but we've already moved on. So I'd feel comfortable, or I'd like to open it up again for public comment and see if there's anybody out here, because we do have a new attendee. Give them the chance to make public comment if they want. Is that okay with everybody? So this is a time for public comment. If you would like to, Leah, do you want to do the spiel, or do you want, I mean, I can just say, raise your hand if you'd like to make a public comment.
I think that's sufficient. Yeah. I guess what I will say is if anyone has a comment and they are having trouble with Zoom or raising their hand, that they are more than welcome to send it to the police auditor email address on our website, and I will forward it to the group. Thanks.
Okay, I think that was probably sufficient time. We can move on to the case review. Before you do though, I have a question about the case review. Usually it's spelled out that Officer A, Supervisor B. I didn't see that in the case. Did I just miss it? Okay. Will you clarify?
I set it out. Sorry.
Will you clarify who it is when you're doing?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was the one difference with doing it the way we did it this month. We didn't have that redacted version, so we can work on that. But yeah, in the PowerPoint, I see, so the involved officer is almost always Officer A. So I made the officer who sort of discovered the discrepancies Officer B, and then the supervisor involved Supervisor C. So just so you know, that's my framework. And then like Carolyn said earlier, we use gender neutral pronouns to make sure that this stays as anonymous as possible. No identifying characteristics. There we go. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, Carolyn? Yeah, okay, cool. Make sure I'm gonna share the right thing. Hold on. That is not the right slide. Okay. All right, thank you for bearing with me, everyone. Slower than I hoped for, but hey, we're coming back from a break. So case summary for this month. There's one case, it's about a discrepancy in background check forms. So the summary of facts, Officer B was going through stored background files of failed applicants and found that there were 6 that corresponded to current employees, and 5 of those were sort of in the right place where they were linked to the current employee file, and one of them was not, and that was Officer A's. So Officer B reviewed the file from 2016 and compared it to 2018 and found several discrepancies. Wrote that up and notified their chain of command, who brought the matter to the attention of the IA and the auditor. We opened an IA file. Initially, this was one of those that kind of got reclassified a few times, so I included this in here to hopefully answer any questions that anyone had about this. Initially, we looked at it, we were like, oh, this looks like an allegation of misconduct, but then upon thinking about it a little more, because the alleged behavior actually occurred before the employee was an employee, we turned it to an incident review and assigned it to Supervisor C instead of an IA investigator. So Supervisor C could do what Ryan called a discrepancy interview. I think that's what you called it, something along those lines. But so Supervisor C could try to figure out what was the story behind those discrepancies. So Supervisor C did that discrepancy interview, and then in that interview determined that it appeared that Officer A was not truthful in their personal history questionnaire and also not during the interview with Supervisor C. So then we opened an allegation of misconduct related with an allegation that the officer was not truthful in their interview with Supervisor C. Officer was notified and resigned during the course of the investigation. And then once that officer was not an employee, we didn't do the rest of the investigation. So that's why you didn't see, well, I think I actually get to that really quick. So here's the allegation language that they were untruthful in their statements to Supervisor C. And there weren't adjudication recommendations because the person resigned. So here are your issues for discussion. And yeah, I have a few other things that we can talk about, but I'm sure they'll come up. So I will go ahead and stop. Well, I have to take a picture of the office because look, I'm the only one who hangs out there right now. But thank you, Michael. I saw that. But I'll stop sharing and let you guys talk.
All right, we'll use the same order we used for the public comment. And the first topic will be the complaint intake, classification, investigation, and monitoring. Michael, do you want to start us off on that again?
Oh, yes. What were those again? Complaint intake,
Classification,
and monitoring.
and investigation.
Investigation. Where's monitoring? Where am I getting that from?
Well, that was at the end. Yeah,
Okay.
they're the four. Intake,
That's the four.
classification, investigation, monitor.
All right. I'll see how I do. So intake, there doesn't seem a lot to say. I'll say it before anyone else does, since I know someone else will say it. It's always nice to see something that is internally referred from inside EPD to the auditor's office. As far as classification goes, that makes sense how it was reclassified into an incident review, although I'm not 100% sure what an incident review is. It makes sense that it wasn't an allegation of misconduct because of the employment status at the time of although there was just, well, okay, that happens later, right? And there's also renewed dishonesty during the interview. So then that conceivably would be an allegation of misconduct, although at a certain point, employment is terminated.
Right. It was. So it is a little squishy because there were actually two IA numbers related to this that both got smushed into your file. And just to clarify for everyone, incident review is almost a placeholder classification sometimes. Sometimes they stay that way, but it's assigned to someone to investigate anything short of notifying or interviewing the employee, because then there's a bunch of notifications and rules that come into play. So basically incident review is where we put things to look at them and figure out what is going on without notifying and freaking out the employee unnecessarily. Like once we figure out something is going on, then it gets switched to an allegation or something else, or it gets closed out. Does that make sense? Does that help?
That's why I don't know what it is, because it's
Okay. It's squishy. It is. It's the mystery box one. I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
So intake, classification, monitoring. What's the other one? Investigation. Thank you. So there was no investigation from the auditor's office at this point, right? This was only. So I think it was impressive, and I would also say that I was impressed by the investigation. It was just nice, we see a lot of descriptions of interviews that the officers do in their course of these investigations, but this one was like Law and Order worthy, right? And the sort of the gotcha moments, like they're like the questions are in this like, aha, but I know from this other source that there's this, and then it's like, gotcha. So it had drama to it. I enjoyed the sergeant's April 26th memo was a great read. There had a drama and suspense and all of that. So I thought the investigation was very well done and well narrated.
I will pass that on to the supervisor. Thanks.
All right, Jose, are you ready to talk about complaint intake?
Sorry, excuse
Classification,
me, yes,
investigation and monitoring?
I am. I think that's, in terms of our conversation, this is gonna be the easiest part of it. I don't know if there's much to add to what Michael said. This is a confusing case to me, and I guess I'll add that part here. Because I was like, oh, officer, am I allowed to say that, resigned?
Officer A, you could say the reason. I think that that's all right.
Yeah, I was reading this gripping drama, and then all of a sudden the end.
Okay, I just put our order in the chat, just so everybody is aware. I meant to do that earlier. Bill, you're next, and then Alan, we'll hear from you after that.
Thank you, Carolyn. So these ones are always tough for me because it always seems like this is just always, it would be just a human resource issue and not an IA issue when it's a employment, questionnaire and do that. And I understand the command chain of the police department is much different than in a company outside of that doesn't have that same sort of piece, but that's where I'm always, when I look at this and we had, an insubordination thing last year that bothered me that it actually went through this process instead of a process that, didn't require this sort of investigative time to do it. But I do like it ultimately got classified right. I think it was handled outside of our system to come to the conclusion of that there was a lot of discrepancies that he could not come back and correct and do that. So overall, I think that the end result was the right, the way it was handled. So thanks.
That's something we definitely we struggled with on this one, but it's a question that comes up a lot, as you guys have seen or will see. But the question of, is this HR, IA, and frankly, having the auditor be the intake point for all the complaints, that's the decision I'm looking at a lot. So thank you.
Well, for me, I will disclose, as I understand it to be the practice of the board, that Officer B, they used to appear in front of me often in court. I know them to be pretty thorough investigator. I wasn't surprised that they found that discrepancy and that this case went the way that it did. On this opening topic, the only thing I'll say, and I'm not cynical about it, but to me, it was slightly disappointing that the first case is an internal investigation, that it shows that it worked. I appreciate it. It was well done. The intake, it functioned, but it's also time invested. I don't know if Bill was perhaps alluding to this, but it's time invested both in us and in the whole process and it isn't, the meat of a police citizen encounter, which I think that's what but I'm glad to know that it functions, and it did function, and it appears to be all very copacetic and good. And it was enlightening to listen to the 3 hours and 8 minutes of that initial interview. It was because it's a mystery until you hear it. So that's my comments. Thank you.
That's good feedback. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to know what you guys want to review.
All right, I have a couple things. So I think Michael's question made me think of this. So it started out as just looking into where the discrepancy lay as an unofficial allegation. If in the interview with Supervisor C, if it hadn't been clear that this person was being untruthful in that interview, would it have just been brushed aside and not turned into an IA? You think it would have escalated it at some point anyway?
Ryan and I actually talked about this earlier today. We're like, this is gonna come up. So no, so there is, if you lie on a personal history questionnaire, which appeared to have happened in this case, that's a fireable offense. So
Okay,
no, it wouldn't have gone away.
okay.
Ryan,
I
is that-
agree.
Yeah, and one of the things we tell them, and if you listen to that interview, it's been a while since I listened to it, but I'm certain it was probably there because Michael's always really good about, or I'm sorry, the investigator is really good about doing this. Is they will always say right off the front, like, hey, whatever you do, you just be truthful, because this will follow you all the way through your career. And so we actually have I think there's a piece of paper that they actually sign that says that if there's ever a point in time, anytime after this, no matter how long you've been here, that we found out that you lied in your background, that's grounds for termination. So yeah, it absolutely would have still got to NIA.
Okay. My other thing, and so I've been on the board, I don't know, a few years, 5 years, something like that. And there are so many times that we've watched an interview or listened to an interaction or, done something. And in my mind, I'm just like, oh, that officer is lying. They're lying, they're being untruthful. And I've asked Mark numerous times before he retired, why isn't truthfulness an allegation here? And I think usually he's like, oh, it's because that's a very serious allegation. That's like a career ending serious allegation. So we tend not to do that unless we're absolutely sure that this is like an escalate. Like, is that accurate, Leah, what I'm saying? Okay. So I was actually really, really impressed and really interested in this case because it actually did do the truthfulness. And Alan, I understand what you're saying about wanting to get that more like community impact part of this. And I agree. Those cases I think are really important to see too. But this being a truthfulness that was sustained, or I mean, maybe not sustained because it didn't get that far, but I imagine it would have been sustained had it gone that far. I will just say that. I appreciated that was something that was alleged. That was the allegation that you put forward, and I think that that maybe takes guts, and I appreciate that. So I do like the classification, the investigation, everyone already said it, and the monitoring and the intake. Yes, I love it when it's internally brought forward. So now we will talk about EPD policies, practices, and training. And oh, Jose.
I'm sorry. I'm wondering if I had a couple of questions written down, and I think it is in the topic of investigation. Can I pose one more before we move on from that section?
Absolutely.
Okay. On the first page of Officer B's memorandum, the second paragraph, the last sentence reads, upon reviewing the memorandum from the 2018 background, I learned that blank did not have access to the 2016 background file. I guess I'm just wondering, did we ever find out why they didn't have access? Is that relevant to question to ask here? If not, we could.
That is a good question. I'm going to direct it to Ryan.
I knew that was coming. That's why I unmuted. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yeah, so I don't know which one. I don't have your A's and B's, so I'm not sure. What the initial person who found the packet, the previous packet that the new investigator didn't have access to, it was going through some other items, and all of a sudden it showed up, and it was recognized that wasn't provided to the background investigator who did the background that actually got him hired. So that's why, yeah, it is absolutely relevant, and it's not normal. I think I mentioned earlier when I was talking about our background process that people will go through that process multiple times, and they will, every time they do that, will add that paperwork into it. In this case, there was a mistake made by somebody that happened earlier, and that packet was not provided to the investigator at the time.
Can I ask a
Thank
follow-up
you.
to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
How often and how thorough are these audits that are happening on this material?
That is a question I'm not going to be able to answer for you because I'm not involved with those. But again, I see Leah writing, which will be helpful because I will get that answer for you and I'll get it back to you.
Thanks. Michael.
Yeah, I also had a follow-up, and this was something that occurred to me early on when I was reading the file, and then I forgot about it. There was mention of different storage areas, and so in my 2021 head, I was imagining these as like online storage, like different server areas, but I don't know if that's, it sounds like maybe they're actually physical storage areas. How does all of that work?
Yeah, so I don't have the retention dates as far as how long we're required to keep those, but it is actual physical files. So yeah, it can be, it can take up a lot of space. And those are requirements that DPSST has for our agency. And we also have to make those accessible to them at any point in time. And they do audits as well on the agencies as for their backgrounds. But I don't know the frequency of that. But to answer your question about the actual files, yeah, that is hard copy files.
Is there anything else on this complaint intake section? No more follow-up. Okay, Jose, I'd like you to start, please, on EPD policies, practices, and trainings.
Yeah. Thank you for that transition question, Michael. That was going to be the next question I had asked. I was going to ask actually was about like archiving and record keeping processes. I mean, I'm involved with that at the university, and I know how like expensive and difficult it can be to keep records. It's just a pain in the butt. So yeah, does the department have a sense or like a plan of digitizing records, or are we bound by law to keep physical records? I think I'm just asking that as a out of naivety more than anything.
I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find that for you. Yeah, I know that there are requirements for us. I absolutely know that there's requirements for us. I don't know to what extent, how long, and but we do have to keep those hard copy files, and I can double check with you on how long that, or double check and get back to you on how long that's supposed to take place. The other piece to it is the information that's inside of there. There's CJIS information, which is Criminal Justice Information System, which is criminal information that's inside those backgrounds. So they can't actually leave a facility that's not a CJIS secured facility. So there's other pieces to that that are kind of come into play on that. So for example, if a background investigator is taking a file home, they have to leave that CJIS information there at the police department and bring the other information home with them. So by law, those things can't leave. So there's a lot of little nuances to that. And again, I'm not the background guy, so I apologize, but we can certainly find that for you.
Yeah, I guess the other question that I had written down before he came in was one that Alan had posed as well, was considering use of marijuana and how that was similar or different than the alcohol use policy or other kinds of. I know this case had more than one discrepancy in truthfulness, if we can characterize it that way. So it's not like the whole thing, hinged on that specific one, but yeah, I guess just another kind of curious.
Sure. So after having that conversation, I was texting. That's why I kind of went off screen here and trying to get some of this stuff answered for you. Matter of fact, somebody's calling me right now, but I will mute that. So I did find out that we follow the state law on the marijuana use side of things. So if there was issues that took place prior to, I think it was 1997 when that was passed, that it made it legal in Oregon, then we would look at those differently than anything from 97 forward. So marijuana usage in general is going to be looked at similar to any type of alcohol abuse or alcohol use or any of those types of things as well. I think you asked another question and my teenager let out the dogs and I was trying to get them back in. So if I didn't answer your whole question, can you please just catch me up on what I might have missed? I apologize.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, perfect.
Jose, are you done with that? Okay, thank you. Next is Bill.
You'll have to excuse me if there's a vacuum noise in my background. The cleaning people are here in my office, so sorry about that. But Ryan, I want to say that if the internal affairs gig doesn't work out, I think you could be a PIO for the department with your answers about, I don't know that, but I'll get back to you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess, you know, the only comments I have about, you know, I think EPD's policies are very clear on truthfulness and I like to hear that, you know, during these background interviews, they are signing a sheet saying, and it's reinforced throughout the interview that, you know, any, you know, untruthfulness that they, you know, that comes out of this interview that and out of the background check will, you know, carry forward, that it's just not, okay, I got away with it 2 years later, as in this case, it still comes back to haunt you. And I think that's, you know, something that I appreciate with the department, that it isn't just, well, he's been here a while, we like him, let's just leave him in place. So that's, I appreciate that.
If it's me, I'm gonna riff on that and say that, yeah, the practice of the investigator investigating one of his own and making him feel relaxed. And I mean, I guess it kind of also fits in the investigation category, but I was impressed by that and let it land where it lands. And then like, I loved the silence. It was a long silence. The marijuana issue for me, it just seemed what we were listening to, there was in the element of gotcha. And it's back to what Carolyn said about the alcohol questions. It was just concerning, like it needs to be, I hope that it's about the policy of looking for people with substance abuse problems wherever they are, and not specific, like how many times did you smoke pot? You know, you said 7 and it's 14, you know, that kind of, you know, I'm hoping that it's moved away from that and it's gotten to identifying people with issues involving, you know, misuse of otherwise legal substances. So, but otherwise, yeah, I think the fact that you investigated one of your own, the practice of doing that and doing it with without a bias of clearing the person, it was, you know, that I found it impressive. That's it.
Go ahead,
Yeah, Ryan's got his hand raised. Here you go.
So I've been texting off to the side here trying to get answers to some of your questions. So Alan, to your point, so marijuana use, since it's been legal, is absolutely not an issue for us anymore, and it is looked at as a substance thing. So the same as like if you're overusing alcohol, there's an issue there. If you're overusing marijuana, there's potentially an issue there. And I'm not saying there is, but there potentially could. It's something that we want to look into. So the marijuana use, since it's become legal within the state of Oregon, does not preclude somebody from being hired. The issue with this was the clear problem here of saying I only did it once, and in another background saying I've done it hundreds of times. And I mean, it's really hard for somebody. If it was once or twice or 3 or 4 times, and then I say once, then maybe, but it's pretty hard if you know you've done it 100 times when you say it one time to come back and say I've only used it once. So that's what we're looking at. And then I also had the question came up earlier about how long someone had to wait after they got to a certain point within the process. And so once they get to the background phase, if they don't move forward past background, then they have to wait 2 years before they can reapply again. There's more questions, I know, but we'll get those other ones to you later. This one, at least I got you a couple. I don't want to be that PIO, Bill.
All right, Ellen, were you done? You were done with that section, right? Okay. So I'm next. I don't think I have much to add with this one. I don't think that there's any training that you can do to make somebody truthful. So I appreciate that that's not even attempted, because if you're going to be a dishonest person, you're going to be a dishonest person. And the best thing would be to separate, although this person resigned. So I think that's it. But I do appreciate that it is taken seriously. Michael.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a lot to add, except that it was clear to me in reading the file that the issue was not marijuana use, but truthfulness, and that the you know, it's always strikes me that, you know, there are people who will lie about anything, really. And I'm not always even sure why. You know, you could say, well, yes, this is someone who's trying to get a job, and so they're going to be dishonest about things that they think might disqualify them from getting the job. But the truth is, they don't know, right, necessarily how those things are even being weighted, right? You know, you always have the chance, if you are honest about something in your past, to explain it. That's not the case if you lie in the interview. You can't then explain the lie. That's a lie. And so I think that as I see it, and this is how I saw it in reading the file, the question of having lied about the use and about all the other things was infinitely more significant. It had much more bearing on whether or not this person should be a law enforcement officer than whether or not they had used marijuana however many times they had used it, or wherever. Although I would have some questions about the judgment of someone who also then used it on an international, while traveling internationally. I don't know how specific to get on that, but in a situation where there's all kinds of violations of policy and law and risks, and there's so much going on in that. That's in addition to whether or not the substance is legal in Oregon.
Okay, I think we can skip over adjudication recommendations since we had no adjudication recommendations. So with our, that's right? Yeah. Can we still adjudicate them anyway? Just kidding. That wouldn't be fair.
I unmuted just in time to laugh, sorry.
So let's do the auditor report.
Oh, wow, thanks. Okay, thanks, guys. Well, I was just thinking, this actually will lead into the auditor's report. So when I got hired, I had a pretty intense background check, more than what you all have to go through, but less than what the police go through, just a little bit less though, because I have access to criminal justice information too. So, but I just like, that's one of the most uncomfortable conversations of my life, that long one where you're just laying it all out there because you want this job. And so just, I understand not wanting to talk about some things, but you got to be honest. And so anyway, thank you for your thoughtful consideration of all of this. I appreciate all your comments. I appreciate your feedback. It's always good to hear. So I was going to start with a welcome back. So we're circling around to the welcome back, but it's good to see you guys again. I appreciate you being patient with us getting out the packet and the materials this month. We are working through some wrinkles. I hope that we got there. It sounds like the OneDrive worked well for everyone. Oh God, I love it. Okay, good. That's great. That was a lot easier for us too. So Vicki and I will work on the one thing. It sounds like maybe we'll just include a list at the beginning of like, so-and-so is going to be Officer A and so-and-so will be Officer B. Maybe that'll clarify a little bit. Something else I realized that I didn't do was you guys talked about doing perhaps a case and an incident review every month. This year you got them merged into one, but I don't think that's what you meant. So I will try to remember that for next month. And this comes to my big news. I have 2 new hires in background checks. Speaking of background checks, But yes, I'm very excited. I have 2 folks who did great in their interviews, great applications. I do not anticipate any issues in their background checks, and I'm looking forward to bringing them on next month, assuming they still want to work for me. I hope they do. But yeah, so I'm really just, yeah, that it kind of blocks out everything else because I'm just so excited about that. But there's one other main thing that I wanted to talk to you all about. One thing that came up a lot that I've just been thinking about a lot is trying to figure out more public education around the system that we have in place, how this works, what you guys see every month, what you all have access to, all of this stuff around civilian oversight in our structure and how that all works. And the NACOL, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, that conference is occurring, well, the virtual part of that conference is occurring right now, and they're sort of drawing it out over several months. So if you guys actually, if you're interested in any of those seminars, let me know. I think I can register you for 1-by-1 virtual seminars if that's, they have a lot of stuff on jails, I'm assuming. And Michael does like research on this stuff, so I know he's been there. But one of the panels I went to was talking about different ways that CRBs are selected and different ways that CRBs interact in their communities. And that was really interesting to me. And one thing I've mentioned to Carolyn, but something I want to float to you all is some of them have requirements for like 3 outreach activities per year. And Michael literally at Police Commission just talked about how much work you guys have to do to get prepared for these meetings. So I feel a little bad throwing this at you now, but I'd like for you all to just think about maybe community events that you already go to, but think where places, I mean, obviously COVID makes things hard, but as far as when you're out in the community, when you're interacting with folks, when you're at community gatherings, try to have your CRB hat on sometimes, let people know what we do. Direct them to me if they have questions, but frankly, there's a level of trust and connection that you all can have with folks as volunteers that I'm not always going to have. So when Beatrice comes back, I'm going to work with her to come up with more events that maybe you all could go to. You could be at our table or be floating in the crowd, whatever you're comfortable with. But as hopefully things start to get back to a different way, or even virtual events, but just ways that we can really get out in the community and do a little more education piece about what we do. And I'm going to be working on that on my end too. I talked to council about doing more like videos, like here are the basics of civilian oversight in Eugene, sort of like what I did with all of you for your onboarding, but hopefully not, you know, a little more polished, because I know how I can be. But that's just, it's something that's been floating in my mind. And if you have ideas or you want to check in with me, feel free. You know, I'm here all the time. So I'd love to talk to you more about that, but I think it's an important thing that I want to work on moving forward. As far as my stuff, it's still busy, you guys. I took a little break, tried to get away, and I failed. But we've got some interesting cases, I guess is the good news. We have some interesting stuff going on, interesting stuff coming down the pike. Just a sort of programming note, our July, we included July open and closed, but not August open and closed, frankly, because they just weren't done yet. So we will get those out to you for the next packet. That's on me. It's just a difficult thing. Oh, I like that question, Michael. Sorry, Michael just asked me if we could do business cards. I just thought it was to me. That's a great idea. I will check.
I was hoping we could do actual hats too. Like you
Ooh, yes, okay, we'll work on that, Carolyn.
like a top hat type situation.
You could put the business card in the side. I apologize. Okay. Yes, I can work on the business cards. I think that's a great idea. That's something I do for one of my boards. We have like pins and business cards and stuff, and it's helpful. So we will work on that. And then, oh yeah, I told you about the open and closed cases. Oh yes, council is back. Council was on a break as well. So we will be ramping up work on the ad hoc recommendations with both the trio of me and the city manager and the municipal court judge, but also sort of looking more into the complexities of those recommendations Sarah made a great presentation to council of how to sort those recommendations as far as this would require work at the state level or federal level or locally. This is the decision maker included and all of that. That's all from the city council packet from July 26th. And I actually recommend, it's really, I thought Sarah, we worked together, but Sarah's brain just works amazingly well at all that stuff. So if you're interested in where we're going with the ad hoc, that's all in the materials from the July 26th council meeting. And we will be back in the next few months reporting back on where we are with that. But it's going to be definitely taking up more time. So again, I'm really excited to have more staff because we have more cases. They're not stopping. And then, yes, like we talked about at the beginning, Sergeant Nelson or Ryan, that one is now our full-time IA person. I spoke with the chief. He's looking at trying to get another full-time IA person because we do have a lot of work right now. And it's just a lot of work right now. So if you guys ever have any questions or you see something in open and close you want to talk about, let me know. And I think that's it. Does anyone have questions for me? Alan.
Alan has a question about, so I get it's a process question, I guess, as much as a substance question. So I read the report and there are things in there, and what I guess you're saying are the closed things. What if I have a question or comment, is it part of this meeting, or are you saying it's an offline thing?
Either way, if there's something in there that you want to bring to the, I mean, those documents are all public.
Okay, so I had a question about the fact that there was a complaint or a passing thing about someone upset that their DUI was in the paper. And there was also a closed case with an officer who was cited for DUI. And I was just curious, do they get the same, is the policy of EPD in releasing the person complaining about that they were in the paper? Is there any difference in the treatment officer arrested versus civilian arrested?
That's a really good question. My understanding is the information that and I could be wrong, but in general, the calls that I get that are upset about their mugshots being released, that's from the county. And Ryan, I need you to jump in if I'm wrong, but isn't that usually from when the jail booking?
Yeah, typically that's the case. And I think that correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't have a lot of exposure to this case that Alan's discussing, but I believe that was investigated by another agency. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Actually, that's a good point. So
Yes, thank you. You're right.
Yes. But then also different law enforcement agencies are both in charge of the release of that information and the investigating of that incident. So I hope that helps. So and neither of them are agencies that I have jurisdiction over.
I agree. I'm sorry. You're right. The agency was OSP. The other thing that just occurred to me, it goes back to the other part of the meeting, but is there a polygraph in the hiring process of EPD? Just curious. Thank you.
You're referring that one to me, Leah?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. No, polygraphs in Oregon are not legal for our hiring process, which, as an investigator, and I think I speak for probably all of our investigators, we are particularly interested in why people from agencies or from states that require polygraphs are wanting to come to Oregon, especially if they've been a police officer somewhere else. I always ask the question, like, why Oregon? So what is it that brings you to Oregon? Because there always are some concerns as to, did you do something? Did something happen back there in the state that you're required to be subjected to a polygraph to get hired at another law enforcement agency that would preclude you from getting hired there, and that's why you're coming here. So it does become an issue, but all of us are very aware of that, and so we're pretty critical. We put a critical eye on that too.
Thank you.
Since they got brought up, I'll just one of my regular topics is polygraphs. The science on them is pretty definitive that they aren't reliable, which is why they have such limited usefulness in court. So it's actually when people do rely on them, they often what it ends up doing is it results in less thorough other kinds of checks on someone's truthfulness, which are in fact more reliable than polygraphs. And so it's actually, I think, probably a good thing not to rely on them.
Jose, sorry, I guess it is the auditor's report. I guess I can call on people.
Leah, are you the new Mark? Are
That's a
you
good
now our police
question.
auditor?
I am the interim police auditor. Some folks have been emailing me, calling me temporary, which I'm trying to not take personally, but I think it's just a misstep. But no, I am the interim police auditor. That's my contract with the council right now. I do not have a date at which that would be reviewed again. But if you have positive input about me, you are welcome to contact your city councilors. If you have negative input, please just tell me so I can fix it.
Okay, well, I didn't know whether to be like, hey, congratulations, you
Thank
know,
you.
to like ruffle your feathers a little bit, or
Yeah.
I guess we'll wait until after this like interregnum period to ruffle your feathers.
It does mean temporary, you're right. Sorry, yes, thank you. I will definitely let you know. I believe council will be doing some kind of, I don't know whether it's going to be a recruiting process or like a review process. I'm not sure what it looks like in their minds yet. So I will keep you updated. And certainly they will be contacting you for input, regardless of whether it's positive or negative. So thank you.
And we should probably be truthful, right?
Absolutely, always. Because things will happen now. But yeah, so interim. All right, do we have any other questions? If I've missed it, it's very possible I've missed something, but as you know, I am always here. So.
All right, if we're done with the auditor report, it is time for closing comments, and we'll just go around the circle the same way. We'll start with Bill and then move down the list.
I just want to thank Ryan for all his information tonight. I know we put him on the spot, making him the background history, but I appreciate all you do, Ryan, and welcome as the official IA supervisor.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're going down the list, that's me. Thank you. I appreciate being a part of your meeting. This was really my first meeting to participate. I hope that it was acceptable level of participation. Officer Sergeant Nelson, thank you. Welcome to the role that you're in. And again, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Leah, for all you're doing, and Beatrice and Vicky. See, they're still, well, not Beatrice. Well, thank you for what you're doing. It's just not for us right now. I had a question. I think in October is when we do the election for the chair and vice chair, even though we do the liaisons in January now. Is that true, or did we switch it all to January?
That sounds right.
Okay, so just keep that in mind for next month, everybody.
Is there a term limit, Carolyn, that you can be re-upped for an unlimited amount of times? Just a question.
I think chair is unlimited, but we do have the term limits for member.
Yeah, I honestly am not sure. I have to look at the bylaws. I think that's correct though, that there are term limits from council, but not as far as officers. I'll check.
Yes, please do. And also, Alan, do not worry. We will have a lot of meaty cases in your time here. That is a promise.
I'd say I look forward to them, but I don't, because I wish they never happened. So, but they do, and it's important that we see them. So thank you.
My turn. So yeah, thank you, Ryan, and thank you also to Leah and Vicky for figuring out how to do this new online thing. That it was remarkably easy. I was expecting it to be, you know, whenever I see anything that's Microsoft, I'm always like, oh my god, but it was just so smooth and easy and worked great. I didn't know that it could be like that whole password thing with Microsoft. So I also learned something new about that. So there was, yeah, yay.
Seconded. I love moving work into the 21st century, though I know the the sensitive nature of information, keeping that protected is always difficult, but I like coming into the police auditor's office and saying hello. I also like doing it over my email.
All right, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda, so we will adjourn. Oh, Leah, you have something.
Sorry, I just realized that I did not mention how incredibly hard Vicky has been working to keep us afloat and keep me on track, which is not an easy task, y'all. So I really, really appreciate her doing all of that and working to upgrade us to the OneDrive. She's been amazing, and I'm very lucky for the staff that I do have already. So thank you.
Oh, maybe I'll add, I was on the panel for the interviews for the people, and I agree that Leah, that the 2 people that are going to background check are stellar candidates, and I'm very excited for them to be on staff. I think it's okay for me to say that. If not, sorry. Okay. So now we can adjourn. Is that correct? Our next meeting is October 12th, and we will have hopefully a case and a service call. Is that right?
Case and an incident review.
Incident report. All the words, they're so confusing. Okay. I'll see you all next month. Have a good start of autumn.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
I could see you all.